Hello and welcome to this webinar on backing up your business data. How to back up like a boss. So cybercrime is on the up, and knowing what and how to protect is the most important thing. It's absolutely imperative, because if you lose your data, you may lose your business. But a quick disclosure, cybercrime is constantly evolving. So your backup policies need to be regularly reviewed. Make sure that you and your business evolve with the hackers and cybercrime. So the first thing when you're looking at any type of backups is understanding what data do you not want to lose. That's the most important thing. And then you need to list out all of the data within the business. And then what is absolutely important that you cannot lose. Now, when we talk about data, we're talking about obviously raw files and folders, but we're also then talking about the wider scope. So your emails, your Teams data, databases that you're using, whether you're using a CRM system or you may have a website which is selling and making customer orders. How is that backed up? Is it hosted? In which case you need to find out, if you're using someone else's hosted solution, is there redundancy built into it? Are they backing up everything that's on your website or your hosted environment? It's really, really important that you fully understand it. So many people say, oh, it's fine, it's hosted, I'm using a hosted this or a hosted that, it's fine, it's all protected. But is it? Yes, some of the bigger hosted environments will have multiple backups that protect your data. But if they get hacked, how much downtime will that incur for you? If you're solely reliant on using one bit of software, or maybe 2 or 3 bits of software, and one of those gets hacked and you can't access it for an amount of time, how much of an impact is that going to have on the business? So this is where we talk about backups as a whole. It's not just backing up your files and folders. It's everything that your business uses. The other flip side to it as well is, depending on what industry you're in, are you going to affect your compliance? Many industries have got different types of compliance. An example might be insurance companies, legal. They generally need to keep data for a minimum of 7 years. That includes things like phone calls. So if you're recording your calls at the moment locally or in a hosted environment, is there a backup of those calls? So it's just really making sure. But the first thing is, you need to just break down what is the entire data within your business. And then what can you absolutely not lose? What would be really frustrating and annoying if you lost it, but it wouldn't affect you too much on a day-to-day basis? And then what do you also need to keep for legacy? The thing is, it's about understanding what stops your team from being able to work is the most important thing, and then everything filters down from that. So, first step, once you've identified all of your data that you wouldn't want to lose, the next thing is understanding where the data is. Is it yours? If you've got an internal server and you're using some kind of software or a database on that server, then you're probably in charge of it, which means that's a fantastic thing from a backup perspective, because you can lay in multiple layers of backups. You're in complete control. If anything happens, then you can basically spin up that backup and away you go. You can go for a full disaster recovery. So a full DR backup would be that you've got something else mimicking the main server. So then if the main server goes down, then the secondary backup will spin up straight away. However, if you're using a hosted environment, so someone else's database, whether it's an ERP system, MRP system, or a CRM system, so depending on what you do as a business, then that's someone else's environment. You need to understand what their disaster recovery plan is. What is their SLA, their service level agreement? Do they guarantee uptime or not? You need to ask these questions just so that you really cover all bases. Often with businesses, they'll be using main software and then have files and folders and just back up the files and folders. But you need to make sure that you're backing up everything else. This includes Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365 recommend that you have a separate cloud backup of their environment. That's them recommending it. Now, obviously, they will try and sell you their own. That's a terrible idea. The reason is that ultimately, with a backup, it's about having that data in multiple places. If Microsoft get really badly hacked, guess what? So will their backup. So you want to make sure that if you've got Microsoft 365, that you've got a separate cloud backup that's completely different, that's nothing to do with Microsoft, so that then if you need to rebuild, whether it's your files and folders, your emails, your calendar, your Teams data, it can all be done in a separate way. So it's really important that you have those multiple layers and different fail safes. Same with things like if you've got hard drives and stuff, don't just rely on one backup of a hard drive. It's always better to have multiple. And then it's understanding if you have a disaster, how fast will you be able to get back up and running? So once you then understand where all your data is stored, so what you need to back up and where the data is, you then need to just really cover off against what disasters could happen. So you've got your standard, which is not if, it's when, if you were to get hacked. So when you get hacked, have a cyber attack, some kind of encryption virus, anything like that, what would happen? What's the process? Then the flip side to that is also looking at standard things like theft. If you've got locally stored data or you've got a local server, if someone was to break in and take that, what would happen? Other theft being, let's say, for example, someone accesses your data, a disgruntled member of the team. You've really got to understand about all of these things. What happens if a disgruntled member of the team clicks delete on their way out? Will you be able to get that data back? Then it's fire and flood as well. So it's just making sure that you really cover off all angles. And then the final element is the timings against the risk. Because what you don't want to do is if you've got an amount of data that you like to keep, but it's not imperative to, it's not mission critical for the business, then you don't really need to worry about having something supersonic that's going to be back up and running within seconds, if actually it can just be a standard cloud backup that might take a day or two to pull it back down from the cloud. But if it's not going to impact your day-to-day operations, then that's probably fine. Whereas if it's something that you have to keep your team working and your clients happy, then you need a different type of backup because you need it to be working very, very fast. So how fast do you need it up and running? How much of an impact does it have on the business? Depending on how important it is, will give you a very good understanding of how much you should invest in the backups. Files and folders or a full image backup. Is it critical? How much redundancy do you need layered in? Do you need instant failover? These are all the different questions that you need to be asking, not just accepting that you have a backup somewhere. It's asking, if you have a backup, how fast will it enable you to get working? The second thing as well is that once you've got all of these backups in place, it's making sure that you actually test it in an actual simulation. So imagine, boom, that's your current server is not available. How fast can you get back up and running using that backup? Because often if the backup is a full image that's going to a hard drive somewhere, then how quick does it take to mount that full image onto a new server or a replacement server or a spare server to get the business back up and running? So that is really the final element that you really need to make sure that you know what's happening. And then the final element is automate everything, or as much as you possibly can. So the first layer of the backup should always be fully automated. Do not rely on human error. So whether it's an automated backup that's happening every minute, every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes, hour, whatever it is that's working for your business that you agree on, it needs to be fully automated. Now, the second layer could be manual. An example might be that you've got a fully automated backup that's happening that maybe goes to a different area of your building. So if, for example, your server died, then you've got that backup in that location really, really quick to get you back up and running. But if, for example, it's an encryption virus that you're trying to protect against, then there's a good chance that both the backup and the main server will be affected. Because if the backup tries to back up the encrypted virus, then guess what? It's going to get encrypted itself. So you then need that second layer that is disconnected from the live environment. And often that might just be a hard drive or a secondary cloud backup that only runs once a day. So it's really important that if that is the case, then you might manually swap it. And this is where the automation against the manual process comes in, because if you're manually going to swap it, it lives in a fireproof safe, or maybe you take it off site. But the first main backup, the one that you're going to really go to 99% of the time, that needs to be fully automated. So yeah, so that's the process really. First of all, there's, as I say, 3 or 4 processes that you need to go through. So the first one is understanding what it is that you need to back up and how important it is. Then you need to clarify where the data actually is and how you can back up, because you will need different types of backup depending on where your data is. Then you need to cover off that the different disasters that can happen, that your backups are definitely going to be adequate for them. Then you look at the timing, so as in how fast it's going to get you back up and running. And then the final element is to just make sure everything is automated. So we hope you've enjoyed that webinar. Any questions that you may have, please do reach out to me. My LinkedIn is just look up Giles Cleverly, or my email address is there on the screen. Also for Syn-Star, all of our updates, whether it's different disasters that have happened, or whether it's just lots of tech knowledge and everything that's going on in the industry, anything that you need to know business tech wise, then Syn-Star can help. Whether it's IT support, telecoms, or cybersecurity, and maybe implementing and helping you implement a more robust backup solution for your business. So we do have a question. A couple of questions come in. So is how do we find out where our cloud data is? That's a great question. So if it's your cloud, so as in if it's a private cloud that you've got, then usually whoever set it up will know where that is. If you're using someone else's, so for example, you just pay a monthly subscription for user accounts on a platform, then you really need to ask them. But generally, most websites will, if you go to the help section and you type that in, normally they will explain exactly what the backup is and where it is. And then obviously they'll normally have steps that they would recommend that you take. So it might just be, for example, if you're using a CRM system that's got lots of customer details in it, you might be able to manually export all of your data. You can then keep that in probably a CSV file, so an Excel spreadsheet effectively, on your private files and folders. So then if anything did happen, at least you'd have all your data there. But yeah, ask the provider is the thing. And the next question is, how often should we back up? It all depends how business critical it is. But generally, the first backup should be relatively in real time. So every 1 minute or 5 minutes. It depends really what business you're in and how much resources the backup takes. If it slows down the network, then potentially you just need to sort of limit what you're going to back up in real time. Whereas then you might then do the proper backup every night. Now, depending on what business you're in, only losing 12 hours worth of production time might be perfectly fine. If you're in a different type of business, then that might not be acceptable. So it really does depend on what the data is, how mission critical it is. But as I say, data is not just about raw files and folders. It's about backing up and getting you up and running. So if you've got mission critical software that you use, it's really making sure that you can get back up and running as fast as you possibly can. There's little impact on the business. So we hope you enjoyed that. Any questions or you want to reach out, then please do speak with me. So the next question is, how often should you back up? So that really depends on the type of information and data that you've got, and whether we're not just talking about files and folders, it's how mission critical the software is that you're using and how fast you need to get back up and running, depending on the size of the business and how you're using technology. So it's a real difficult one to say, but generally if it's mission critical, every 1 to 5 minutes. If it's not so mission critical, then potentially every 1 to 4 hours. And if you're doing full image backups, then try and do them every evening or every weekend. But it really depends on what data it is you're backing up. So I think that's all the questions. So thank you very much for your time. Please do reach out on all the social media platforms are available. And if you've got any questions, then please email. There's my email address on there. So thank you very much.